Welcome back to the After Dinner Leadership Podcast. It's lovely to have you here. My name's Simon Fagg. I'm your host, and today's guest is a lady called Amy Jacobson, who has written a book called The Emotional Intelligence Advantage. And we had a great conversation about EI or EQ, emotional intelligence. And I was particularly struck by a couple of concepts you shared about owning it and facing it. Often when we look at the topic of emotional intelligence, we use the framing of Daniel Goleman's model, which I love, which is around self-awareness and self-regulation, and then social awareness and social regulation. And Amy has repackaged that into a 5-step process. And the first 2 steps of that process, well, those phases are owning it and facing it. She's talking about the emotion that we are experiencing in situations. It's got me really thinking about how well I do that myself, particularly when we're looking at difficult conversations, which is one of the emphases of her book. So we've got own it and face it. And perhaps the best way I can describe the owning it is to read a passage from her book here, which is what she says. What she means by owning it is own who you are, own the decisions you have made in your life that have brought you to where you are today, own the values and beliefs that are driving those decisions, own how well you manage your own emotions in every situation, own the impact you have on the people around you, own how well you communicate, own what you have achieved to date in your life, because everything you've achieved so far in life is on you. So own it. And I really like this kind of emphasis on personal responsibility, personal ownership for life that you're living, the behaviors that you're demonstrating, that you're sending out, and also how you respond to the way others are interacting with you. And I had a really good example of this that I immediately thought of with regards to a feedback conversation, which I was having with a team member that I was particularly nervous about because it was a bit more sensitive about the way in which they took responsibility for things. And I thought about how I was going to phrase this and word it, and I was a little bit nervous about how it was going to be received. When I delivered the message, I really loved the response. I thought this was a really emotionally intelligent response. The person said, internally, I'm feeling really quite defensive about what you've just said, but there's part of me that knows that it's true. So I'm just going to sit with it for a while and just process that a little bit. And what was fascinating about that for me was just this awareness that someone on the outside of them was sharing feedback with the intent to help them to grow and to develop. The person knew that it was on a sensitive area, but they were willing to remain curious with that data point. Rather than getting offended, rather than pushing back, rather than justifying, they owned it. They owned that information and decided that they would listen and take on board some of that feedback. And I thought that was a really powerful example of this idea of owning it. They didn't let the emotion get in the way of what the message was, what the person who was transmitting, me in that instance, was trying to send out to them. And when we're in an argument or a difficult conversation with somebody, it's so easy for the emotion to grab hold of the steering wheel and to drive the whole dialogue. And very often that results in some sort of car crash between the two people where ego is prominent and they're trying to prove who is right rather than get the best solution. So when we're going into an argument or a dispute, we're thinking about who's won, who was right, and words like always, never either are said or thought about. They always do this, they never do that. And we make these huge sweeping statements about the other party that often are unfair and distort the dialogue. And the emotion is about trying to defend the individual who's having the difficult conversation. You may have found in your own experience that it's easy to feel emotionally intelligent when you're helping somebody else, for example, with a difficult conversation. I know for me as a coach, this is a topic that comes up a lot about difficult conversations. And to coach somebody through that process and help them to prepare for a dialogue is something I feel very privileged to do. But also, you can feel quite emotionally intelligent in that moment. However, when I'm in the middle of a difficult conversation, these are sometimes moments where I feel the most emotionally stupid, frankly. And whatever triggers have happened, it can be very easy for us to think of ourselves only and get wrapped up in ourselves. Now, part of owning it, of course, is we've got to think about the emotion that we're experiencing. But what often is the focus is that we are trying to own the argument rather than own the emotion, trying to build a case that we're right. And that's owning the argument. And typically it's not very helpful. If I can own our emotions, know the reality sits with us, not the other party, then that can be a really empowering space to actually have a far more productive conversation with the other person than we would have otherwise. Fascinating, isn't it, that we can see in emotionally intelligent ways when we're looking at somebody else's dispute, but when we're in it, we can lose some of that important perspective. So there's a great clarity of distance, that ability to be able to kind of remove ourselves in some way from the emotional trappings, the gravity of that emotion that kind of pulls us in like a black hole. It's like we're experiencing the emotion. We're kind of owning the fact that there is an emotion there, but we're not getting driven by it as the only master of the conversation that we're in. Another quote to share here that I like from Amy's book. This is associated with facing it. So the first step was own it. The second is face it. So face it. Remember that there's no such thing as a bad emotion. Simply look at the appropriateness and severity of the emotion and ask yourself, is this emotion appropriate for this situation? Is the severity level of how I'm feeling this emotion appropriate? I like to say, face the emotions, but don't unpack your bags and stay there. We talk about that in the conversation, and you'll hear this in a few minutes' time. But I really like that visual metaphor there of this, carrying this baggage around with these emotions, and then kind of setting up camp, almost like unpacking the bags, getting all those emotions out, laying them out in front, and right, I've formed a position. This is my truth. Nothing else is going to steer me away from it, and consequently, there's likelihood is there's going to be a battle that ensues as we lay down this position. Anyway, you can probably hear Amy's conversation has provoked a whole series of thoughts in me that have been helpful for me to really consider the level of ownership that I'm taking when in a challenging situation, challenging conversation with somebody, and working really hard to face the reality that I own the behaviors, I own the emotions that I'm going to display. The emotions are informing me, they're giving me a data point, but they don't have to determine the consequent behaviors that I share with others. There'll be an information point along with other information points that we would have. So my encouragement to you when faced with those situations is, well, follow Amy's advice, this own it, face it. And part of that is that clarity of distance. Try to encourage that perspective taking of zooming out, going to the balcony and looking at what's going on, looking at what you're feeling, what's actually happening, what's been pushed or pressed on that actually that is the real issue, and own that, face it. And then you can get into really trying to understand the other party more deeply rather than that clouding our judgment. And we're just about all we're projecting is about being the person that is right. And we want to make sure that we're, for a healthy dialogue, a healthy relationship, that we have put ourselves in a position to be genuinely curious about what the other person is thinking and feeling. Take a listen. And if you find it useful, and I hope that you do, please pass it on to someone who you also think would benefit from it, and enjoy. A special welcome to Amy Jacobson to the After Dinner Leadership podcast. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm recording this just after 8 a.m. And what time is it for you in Australia?
It is just after 4 p.m. on the west coast of Australia, and so I'm Perth-based.
Yeah, great. Excellent. It's reasonably respectable times for both of us.
It is. Better than the one I did early hours this morning. So this one's much better time.
Great. Well, you've got my morning voice as well, which I hope transmits well over the airways.
Sounds great.
Amy, one of the things that we are trying to imagine here is that we're around this virtual dinner table and we're kind of talking about things that are important to us and in life and leadership. So let's talk about food, a very important thing. What food reminds you of your childhood?
Oh, so I'm a massive foodie. And when I say a massive foodie, I love all kinds of food. There is very few food that I don't enjoy. But back to my childhood, I would say my mum used to make this crumbed steak. And she would get, just the beef, really thinly sliced beef. She would crumb it herself, and we'd have it with potato bake, and she'd do up some beans and peas with it. And still to this day, every year on our birthday, we still ask for a home-cooked meal. So she still makes it every year, and everyone kind of fights over those last pieces of steak and has them cold. It's amazing. I love it.
Oh, that's brilliant. And give me the kind of the content when you say we. Who else was around the table for you?
Yes, so there was my mum and my dad. There was my older brother. So I've got an older brother named Shane, and he is 2.5 years older than me. And somehow, even when he left home, it's like he could smell the crumb steak from a distance. Anytime mum cooked it, he just walked through the door. And then there's my sister Samantha, or Sam, and she's actually 11 years younger than me, so quite a big gap. She's like we were saying, she's my best friend. It's great to have siblings that are best friends. And yes, still to this day, she loves it too. So it was one of those meals that just never aged. It always came out, and it brought everyone to the table. Everyone got excited. It was kind of that jovial, right? Who gets to pick the best pieces. It was fun. It was good.
Oh, but you've created that image beautifully in my mind. I can kind of see it now and almost smell it.
Yeah.
Almost smell it. So that's great. And Amy, you've written a book called The Emotional Intelligence Advantage. I've got a copy of it here, and I've enjoyed dipping into it. And we're going to go into some of the detail of that, I'm sure, throughout this space. I have an initial thought, really, before we get into that, which is, what is it that has sparked your interest in emotional intelligence specifically? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, that fascination with the mind and with people started at quite a young age. So even if I have a look into my teenage years and what I wanted to be when I grow up, a psychologist, or even at that time, it was very much forensics and criminology. So I just had this fascination with how everybody's mind could be so different. And at that time, it was very much towards that, towards those unpleasant things that people would do, and how their mind was actually wired in a way to do that. And once I started to look into that, as fascinating as it was, Simon, I found it really hard to switch off. Got really emotionally attached to some of those stories, and I thought, this is not going to work for me. So very much parked that side for a while, and went into the corporate world for over 19 years. I was in life insurance for the majority of that time. So very people-based industry as well, very much understanding the risk factors around people and how they work. And through those years, that fascination with the mind just kept on coming up, seeing these big corporations with products that were nearly identical, but some succeed and some not. And when you started to look at it, even though it was the same people churning through all of these organizations, you know what it's like in an industry, people kind of just move around.
Yes.
It was really, it was the level in which people were happy at each workplace. It was the culture. It was the way they communicated. And that's when my fascination really grew for the fact that, you can have a great product, you can have a great organization, but if your people aren't right, you won't succeed. And if your people aren't happy, you won't succeed. and seeing some people come from, roles where they weren't suited and they weren't performing into a role where they became a superstar just fascinated me, because we're so quick to write people off. So that fascination
Yeah.
for the mind and emotional intelligence has always been around. I am a real people's person and I love to observe people. And yeah, that eventually kind of led down the path of setting out on by myself and starting up my new own business and writing the 2 books. And yeah, now I just get to, I guess, observe. Some people call it stalk. I say observe people. So it's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, that's a really good lead in, I guess, to the tradition we have here to just speak about the 3 leadership lessons you wish you'd learned earlier, I guess, as you reflect back on that career, maybe even things that are currently going on for you, to be fair. But what 3 leadership lessons do you wish you'd learned earlier?
Yeah. So I had the absolute honor of being a leader at a young age. So working for a large corporate means there are a lot of frontline leader roles, and I got to go into one of those in my 20s. And probably the first big lesson that hit me hard, and this even hit me hard before I went into the workplace, it came through from my environment, my family, and still to this day, is that you are not your environment. You are who you choose to be. And I think this shone really strong for me, and still to this day does, because I think, we are constantly surrounded by what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. We're constantly surrounded by different people. And I found very much stepping into that workplace, you feel like you quickly conform to whatever the majority culture is or approach is, or the
Yes.
way people go about things. And for me it was that real lesson to realize that the environment doesn't force anything onto you. You let it happen, and you choose to either become part of that environment and align to what is happening around you, or you choose not to. And I think for me, going into being a leader for that first time, from the day before I was a leader to the day I was a leader, I was like, oh, I have to change. I'm a leader now. I must
Yeah.
do this and I must do that. And, and I think it took me a while to realize that you get promoted into a leader role because of your strengths and what you were doing. There is no need to change. Be yourself. And even if the environment around you is creating a certain type of culture, you don't have to be the same as that. You don't have to be the same leader
Yeah.
as the people around you. And that runs true in every part of our life. It's a conversation we have with our kids. It's a conversation that we've had based on our upbringing as well. That you're not a victim of your environment. You're not a victim of your upbringing. You're not a victim of your culture or your school or your friends or your workplace. You are who you choose to be. And I think the more that we accept that and take ownership of that, the stronger we become as individuals.
Great. Thank you. I'd love to hear the other 2, because often I find these things are linked in some way. So can we
Yes.
do that, and then we'll maybe come back to this first one in a moment? What are the other 2 lessons?
Yeah, my second one is always respect the rules, but also fight for what you believe in. So this was this came out in leadership for me, because I think that when you walk into any workplace, there are always the way we've always done things, and there are those blinkers and those limitations that people have put on to say, no, 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 we can't do that. And I'm a big believer in it. And I think, those first couple of times that I didn't agree as a young leader with what was happening or what I was hearing, and, I went, okay, they're the rules, go by the rules, Amy, do the rules. But
Yeah.
when I could not make sense of the rules, when I asked questions and it did not seem logical and I couldn't get to the bottom of it, then that's when I realized, okay, yes, respect the rules, because the rules should always be there, but understand why the rules exist. And if the rules do not exist for a reason that makes sense, then challenge that and see if there's a better way to do it. And I think,
Yeah,
even looking at the COVID time, right? Like there were so many things we were saying prior to COVID that, oh, we couldn't possibly do that. That can't happen. There's no way we could do
absolutely.
that. And then we get challenged, and all of a sudden everybody steps up, and organizations step up, and workplaces step up, and we're in a very different place now. And I think we've always
Yes.
had the ability to do that, but we've just chosen to play by the rules in the past.
Yeah, it's a great example. Yeah, I mean, even think about things like remote working for a lot
Yes.
of organizations. That was just, there was no way that would
No.
have taken years, 5 years of planning
Yeah.
and sorting out and disagreements and then deciding and inaction.
Yeah.
And then what was it, 2 weeks? It's like, right, you got to get your whole workforce
Yeah.
working remotely. It's like, it was a really interesting, I don't, I don't know that everyone did it particularly well, but there wasn't much choice. It was like, right,
That's right.
get it
We
done.
made it work, didn't we?
Yeah,
Like it was,
yeah,
there
yeah,
wasn't an option to say no. There wasn't an option to say, we're not going to do this. This is not how we do work. We had to make it
yeah,
work. And I think that's at times, and I still work with workplaces now where they have these invisible barriers up that just say, no, we can't do that. It's not possible. It's impossible. And it's not until we really
yeah,
challenge them to say, but what if you had to? What if there was no choice and you had to do it? It's at times like that that we really open up our mind to possibilities, because our mind is always looking for the easiest and simplest way to do things. But sometimes that's not the case.
yeah. Great. And what's the third point?
The third one was a big one for me, and it's something that it's something that I really feel strongly about for my kids as well, and that is job titles don't separate people. And this was this I think was a game changer for me as a young leader, because there is so much intimidation that comes with a job title. And it comes back to that first one, you are who you choose to be. And, it relates into the second one as well. But I think when I could get to the point as a leader to understand that it doesn't matter what job title people have, what level they are at, everyone is a human being. And if you treat everybody with the same respect and the same openness, then you can create something pretty special. So just really getting that fear away from me, being able to, stop by head office and say hello to the CEO when I'm, some frontline leader of one of thousands of people that lives in a different state, but knowing that
Yeah,
the CEO is a human being as well. And, he comes and says hello to me when he's in my branch. So why don't I say hello to him when I'm in his office? So it's just those little things, I think,
yeah,
that changed it for me. And I think that still changes today, because that, as I said, that intimidation, or even that look at ourselves to think we're not worthy, or the imposter syndrome, stops us from doing a lot of things. And once we can shut that down and realize human to human, it's it's definitely a game changer.
you mentioned you're teaching that to your son and daughter, Amy, or having discussions about it. What is it?
How do
What's
I
the
do
nature
that?
of those
Yep.
conversations?
So
Yeah,
so my daughter, we have a daughter Amelia who's about to be 19, and our son Cohen who's 17, and it's having those tough conversations regardless of who the person is. So it was days when they would come home from school and they would say, this teacher doesn't like me. This teacher treats me different to everybody
yeah,
else. This teacher doesn't respect me. And I would say to them, what makes you think that? And they'll say, oh, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. And I said, the best thing you can possibly do is go and speak to them. Oh, no, there's no way. There's no way I could speak to them about that. And that's where I kind of encouraged and said, why not? Because you might be taking
yeah,
this completely the wrong way. And it doesn't matter whether they're your teacher, whether they are the principal, whether they are your boss, whether they're, whoever they are, for you to have the ability to go up and speak to someone to clear up a relationship, to clear up a communication, or just even simply to have a conversation. It breaks down walls straight away, and those emotions that we have that are there limiting us and stopping us from doing it can be really detrimental, because they can spin a story that adds to our fear rather than adds to our courage. So really just getting them to understand, my daughter's at university at the moment, and she's studying to be a stage manager. So she gets to work on some incredible musical theatre productions. And she's just finished a really big one here in Australia with Eddie Perfect. And I said to her, "Did you speak to Eddie Perfect?" And she's like, "Mum, he's a superstar. There's so many people there." And I said, "It doesn't matter." I said, "He's still a human being. Like, go and say hello to him. Say, tell him what you think of the production. Introduce yourself so he knows what you're doing." And, it makes a difference. And that last show, I went to the show and I saw Eddie out the front, and I said hi and congratulations. And he asked me, "Have you got a family member here?" I said, "Yes, my daughter Amelia is one of the stage managers." And he said, "I know Amelia." And that's the difference, right? That's the difference. So I think that it rolls through every part of our life, is just having that confidence to treat everybody with the same level of respect as a human being and be comfortable to interact.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. I love that. So there's something in that, excuse me, there's something in that about not being, going to your second point, there's a respecting of like maybe the social rules associated with this person's time is valuable and those type of things. But there's something around realizing that not being overly deferential just because that person might be 3-4 levels up on the organizational chart. They're still human and still appreciate a human conversation.
That's right. It's those assumptions. Nice. We make so many assumptions. And, I think working with organizations, I hear a lot of people say, their expectations aren't getting met by their leader. So, my leader never calls me. My leader doesn't know who I am. They don't catch up with me. And that's terrible that that's happening. But my first question back to them is, have you reached out and contacted them? Like I know that as a great leader, they should be contacting you, but they're not. So what are you doing about it? Have you reached out and contacted them? Have you voiced anything there? And I think that's where I want to encourage people to think it's communication and relationships are not a one-way street. You don't know how that other person is feeling, and don't make assumptions that they're not communicating with you because they don't like you, or they don't have time for you, or they don't see value in it. They might just have a lot going on. They may have just forgotten. Yeah. They may have the best intentions, but it hasn't landed. So you can always do something about it too.
Yeah, I love that. You, on the back of your book, you talk about, or the blurb says you having tough love, and I'm hearing a bit of that in what you've just said.
There is. And I think, look, I'm not for everyone, Simon. And I think it's, it's kind of that disclaimer that I put out there before I work with people that, we always have a lot of fun, but it's going to be quite often that I'm probably going to say things that you don't want to hear, but you probably need to hear. Yeah. Sometimes you need that little bit of ownership, right? And I'll say it in a nice way, and we'll joke about it. We'll have fun, and we can hug at the end if you want to. But yeah, I think it's what we're missing. We're missing just that reality check and being able to put it into line and into practice.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so let me play this back then. So you're not your environment. Respect the rules, but fight for what you believe in. And job titles don't separate people. There's something kind of deeply important about respecting humans, wherever they are, or wherever you are on the, let's call it the hierarchy.
Yep.
And just going back to the environment piece, I want to just explore that a little bit, because the environmental factors, the systems that we operate in, can have a huge influence over our ability to function well.
Mm-hmm.
And it can create a space that there's a very clear set of, I'm going to call them rules, ways of working, those kind of things. And so I feel like there's a combination, a balance in the first and second point that you're making that it needs to be reflected, I guess, because what am I trying to say? we can go in and say, I'm not my environment, and it doesn't force anything on me, but perhaps there's some, I don't know, compensation scheme, as we saw the likes of Wells Fargo, for example, that is encouraging us to behave in a certain way.
Yep.
And the rules to succeed in that organization, in terms of the way that the carrots are given out to people, is suggesting a certain set of behaviors. And let's say there's somebody there that's saying, no, I'm not going to play that game. I know it's unethical.
Yep.
But almost their boss is saying, look, the numbers need to be met, or charges there. There's a question in there somewhere, Amy.
I get you.
Like in that tension, in that conflict, say, well, the system is actually encouraging me to behave in this way. Maybe the unethical example is not a great one, but it happens.
I think Simon,
we see these things.
I think that's a good example. And let's play with that for a moment, right? So you walk into an environment who is doing something, the environment is creating something unethical, and in order to be of high performance or to get more money, more pay, more bonus, more commission, whatever it is, you are urged to do that. The reason why this lesson cuts so true to me is because, when you walk into, say you walk into Wells Fargo, right, that there will be people in there that will be 100% comfortable with that environment. They thrive in that environment. To them, it aligns to their values and beliefs, and they're like, yes, this is a place for me. Then you have those people that have come in who were never like that before, but have conformed and have gone, you know what, if this is what I've got to do, this is what I've got to do. And they kind of become somebody that they're not entirely. And they go home and they probably don't sleep too well at night. And there's always kind of that thought in their mind where they've got that, cognitive dissonance, where their values and beliefs aren't actually aligning to what they're doing day to day. And you've got the people that come in and say, no, this is not right. Now, my take on this is that environment that you've walked into, nobody is forcing you to be there. No one is forcing you to be there. No, I truly get it. I get it. There are bills to pay. You've got to have a job. You've got to have a means to an end, right? But there are plenty of ways to do it. And if you are in an environment like that, you can either choose to conform and choose to go against your values and beliefs. And if you choose to do that, you've got to own it. You've got to say, actually, nobody's forcing me to do this. I've chosen to do it because my priority right now is to put food on the table. My priority right now is to bring home a paycheck. And this is how I bring home a paycheck. And I'm okay with that. That's your choice. So even for that person, I'd say it's not your environment's problem. You've chosen to conform to that. You've chosen to make it okay because your priority at the moment is to get that money on the table. For those people that say, no, I don't want to have to do this, and the boss is turning around and saying, well, this is what it's got to be, you're in the wrong place. Get out. Don't stay there. If it crosses everything, like you've got to weigh that up, right? That humanity aspect to say, do I want to do something that totally goes against everything that I believe in just because somebody else is telling me it's the right thing to do? This is like, it's like adults peer pressure, right? Like if we were speaking to our kids and our kids are in an environment like this, we would tell them, say no, be strong on your no and walk away. But then as adults, we get in there and we go, it's not my fault. Like they told me to do it. No, you've got to take responsibility for it. So I think it's that, and that is that. I'll give you another example, Simon. I can't tell you how many times it's happened that I've walked into a workplace environment and everybody I've spoken to has said the place is toxic. Every single person has said it is toxic here. It's a terrible place to work. And I ask them, who is making it toxic? No one can tell me. And I can speak to every single person there and not one person will say to me, it's me. It's me. I'm the one making it toxic. Everybody else is saying it's someone else. It's not me. It's someone else. And this is a result, right, of everybody coming in, not taking responsibility for it, saying, I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like it. This is too toxic. But I'm going to stay here and I'm going to add to that toxicity. But I'm not going to take any responsibility for it.
I was speaking to someone, I think it was another guest earlier this year. It's like when you're stuck in traffic and it's like, and complaining and moaning about the traffic. It's like, you
You
are
are
the
the
traffic.
traffic.
You are the
Yes.
traffic.
Or you're at the shops and you're like, why is everyone shopping right now? It's like, why am I shopping right now? It takes that real mindset shift to realize that you are contributing to the problem.
Yeah. Wonderful. Now, this seems a really nice segue into talk about the 5 parts of the process that you've outlined in your book.
Yeah.
One of them, the first one, is own it. Now, I feel like there's quite a lot that you've just been talking about in that space. You just give us a 20,000 feet view of the 5 parts,
yeah, sure.
And then we'll dip into them a little bit more.
Sure. So emotional intelligence has 5 key factors. I've taken those factors and just simplified them and brought them into steps to show that they actually flow into each other. So first one being own it is all about your self-awareness and your accountability. So that's all internally to say this is happening, whether I like it or not, this is happening, this is reality. Your second one is face it, which face it is all about your self-regulation. So this is you facing the emotions that are happening, knowing that there's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. What happens is there are emotions that occur and they all have a consequence and they're based on your priorities as well. So you've got to face all of those emotions and process them. You cannot push them down or else they will explode at some point. So that own it and face it are all in your own head. Then you get out of your own head and you go into feel it. And feel it is when you start to understand how the people around you are feeling. It's no longer about you. It's like, how are the people around me feeling? And this is where your empathy, your empowerment, your leadership skills really come into play to understand what makes other people tick. Then you go to ask it. Ask it is your communication. And it's about asking the right questions and answering the questions that are being asked of you. So really understanding that two-way communication and how it works. And then your 5th step is drive it. And drive it is when you bring it all together and you make it happen. So this is when you work smarter, not harder. This is when you actually follow through and do what you say you're going to do. This is your commitment, your motivation, your drive. And that process, every single situation, we go through those 5 steps and we go through that process. And some of us go through it a lot faster than others. But a lot of the time when we're struggling, it's because we've got stuck in one of those steps and we're just looping and we cannot find our way through. Right. And that's how emotional.
Oh, sorry.
No, I say that's how emotional intelligence works.
It does. I love that. And the first 2, as I've understood it, as you've written about it, are really kind of things that we're doing for ourselves, like that more self-awareness and regulation. And then as we get to step 3, the feel it, it's when we're thinking more deeply about other people's.
That's
when we
right.
say feel it, we're feeling other people's feelings and the impact our behavior or the situation's having on them.
Exactly right. Because when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to being a decent human being, you've got to understand your own wiring first. You've got to understand what makes you tick. Why am I doing it that way? What are the neural pathways that are happening in my mind that have created those values and beliefs that then lead to the actions that I take? And once you can understand that, then you've got to use that same philosophy to understand the people around you, knowing that every single person is completely different. So in order to interact with different people, you need to get out of your own head and start thinking, okay, it's not about how I want to do this, it's how they want to do this. So that's where those 3 steps are to do with that interaction.
Great. Could we go back to the face it step, Amy? Would that be okay?
Yes.
So we've talked quite a lot about the own it piece. I want to talk about face it. There's a paragraph that I wanted to read from your book and just get your thoughts on this. So it says, remember that there's no such thing as bad emotion. You've already said that today. Simply look at the appropriateness and severity of the emotion and ask yourself, is this emotion appropriate for this situation? Mm-hmm. Is the severity level of how I'm feeling this emotion appropriate? I like to say, face the emotions, but don't unpack your bags and stay there.
Yes.
That phrase at the end, which I really liked. Okay, so face them, but don't unpack your bags and stay there. What would it mean to unpack your bags and stay in the emotion? What does? And then we'll talk about don't do that.
Yep.
But like, what does it mean if we do?
So if we do unpack our bags and stay there, that is when we start looping in that emotion. So we're really caught up in the feeling that we're feeling, and it becomes more of that woe is me moment. So we're really looking, going, okay, I'm quite upset at this point in time. But instead of thinking about, okay, well, what are the steps I'm going to take to move forward? You just stay in that space. You kind of just sit in your own emotions. So you sit in that anger, or you sit in that sadness, or you sit in that grief, and you're like, I'm not going anywhere. So unpack your bags is kind of like that point where, okay, I'm here to stay. So unpack your bags. This is where we're staying for a while.
Yeah, great. So how, like, I went to a carol service last night. So this is being recorded around Christmas time. I went to a carol service, saw an literally old friend of mine who I've known for many years, whose wife passed away. They'd been married. He told me they would have been married 70 years next year.
Wow.
If she was still alive. So, and he was still heavily grieving, and bless him. And then I sat behind him, someone else came along, and he shared his story again to the person who came and sat next to him. And you could just, my heart was breaking a little bit for the guy. My dad is probably in a very similar situation. My mum passed away 4 years ago, a similar kind of time together. I'd love to, like, how, maybe this is specifically about grief, but I think it applies to other emotions as well. Which angle do I want to take this from? What if I'm in that situation where it's like, look, I'm hurting. This is difficult for me. I'm really struggling with grief or another emotion, anger, or like I feel betrayed or whatever it is. How do I not unpack the bags and stay there?
Yeah. So
what's the process of being able to work with the emotion and then move on, or not move on, but to
move forward? Progress, move forward.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing is actually recognizing the emotion that you're feeling. So you've got to label it. You've got to work out, what is that feeling that I'm actually feeling right now? So whether it is anger, whether it is grief, you've got to work that out, put a label to it and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. Because that's your first kind of internal look that you're having to yourself. Once you do that, you want to ask yourself, is it appropriate? Is the emotion that I'm feeling appropriate right now? And if you were, speaking about that gorgeous man, grief, if he's lost his wife, is appropriate. And that sadness, and especially if it's come up to their anniversary as well, then the emotion that he's feeling is completely appropriate. Then you want to ask yourself, is the severity right? Now, looking at this situation and doesn't matter what emotion it is, right? You've really got to look and go, each emotion, if you were to put on a scale between 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest level of severity and 1 being the lowest, you want to kind of work out where on the scale you are, because there is a big difference in a situation when you look and go, okay, anger is the appropriate emotion here, but there is a big difference between a 10 out of 10 angry and a 2 out of 10 angry. And it's exactly the same with grief, exactly the same with sadness. So if you're looking and going, okay, for somebody whose partner passed away literally a couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago, their grief level is going to be very different to somebody whose partner passed away 15 years ago. So you're looking at that intensity level, right, to understand, okay, what is the severity or intensity that I'm feeling this emotion on at the moment? And the question you're asking then is, am I happy with that? Am I okay with that? Now, there is no right or wrong answer here. If you're looking at that situation, you go, I am happy with how I am feeling right now, and I am happy to keep on feeling this way, then do it. If that's what makes you happy, then please, there is no guidebook that tells you a certain amount of time. The only thing we do know is that the chemical reaction that occurs in our body due to emotional response, the chemical reaction itself takes around 90 seconds. So the chemical reaction happens, and then it's our mind, it's our memory. So, when something happens, whether it makes you angry, sad, happy, excited, whatever it is, you feel it to begin with. And then if you keep on feeling it, it's because you keep on looping in it. You keep on remembering it. It's your mind going, oh my goodness. So if we look at a great thing, like, you're at the Olympics and you've just won a gold medal. In that moment, you're going to be ecstatic. And then you'll have times when you come down from that ecstasy and you're kind of going, oh, but then you'll remember it again and you'll think, I just want a gold medal. Can you believe that? Can you believe it? And you're looping and you're thinking about it again. So the same as grief, in that, an anniversary comes around, or this time of year around Christmas comes around, the memories are going to come back. So that is the point where it's no longer that you're feeling that first emotion. It's the memory that you're going into, and you're bringing that feeling along with the memory. So the memory is there, you remember it. And when we remember it, all of our senses kick in. So you've got that, how did it feel? What did I see? What did it sound like? What did it feel? What did it taste like? What did it smell like? All of those senses come into play, and whatever we've attached to that memory comes with it. So that is what we're doing now. How do you get through that? It is asking yourself and really being able to focus with your mind to say, what now? What is the next step I can take? And that is hard, right? That is really hard, because our mind always wants to find, as I said before, it's always looking for the easiest and most simple way. Like just find me the easiest and most simple answer. And a lot of that time it is just keep on doing what you're doing. That's what the easiest answer is a lot of the time.
And there's comfort in the, I've been offended, or this person hasn't done this thing for me. And there's, like, again, going back to the own it piece, those first two steps, I think, can
loop,
play off each other negatively if we're not careful. And that look at me and how unfair that is, how unfair I've been treated. And this emotion feels valid because that was an unfair thing that person did. And,
absolutely.
They are treating me badly. But there's a point where I guess you take that loop into the interaction, not just with that person, but with other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that, even if we're not expressing it, that will be felt in some way with other people that we're communicating with.
And that's you justifying it to yourself. Like we know that if you have a run-in with somebody, the next time you interact with them, your mind, your deep subconscious mind will be looking for proof to tell you that, see, I told you they don't like you. I told you they're not a nice person. Yes. So you will, mold and make things sound a certain way to make yourself feel better about what happened before. But when we're in these situations, there's this magical question that I use that helps us to look forward, not backwards. And that is, how do we fix this? So this is a question that it doesn't always work the first time. You can have somebody in a highly emotional state and we say, how do we fix this? And they don't answer the question at all. They just continue to vent, continue to get caught up in their emotion. So sometimes I might have to ask this question 5, 6, 7 times. But if you keep on coming back to it, how do we fix this? How do we fix this? Okay, how do we fix this? What are our options? And really get them thinking about that forward process. It's helping the mind to look forward rather than backwards or just straight down to where we've unpacked our bags. So this, how do we fix it, is, and this is, similar to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, Simon. It's sometimes when we are given no choice and we have to make something happen, that is when the magic happens. That is when we realize what we're truly capable of. So in those moments when we're feeling like emotion has got the better of us and our emotional brain is driving, what we do by asking this, how do we fix this, is we're engaging our logical brain. We're engaging our IQ into the conversation to say, well, what are the options here? So then you haven't just got your emotional brain driving, you've got your emotional brain and your logical brain working together. So logic and emotion is always going to be more powerful than just emotion or just logic.
Great. Amy, this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing what you have done. We're going to need to start drawing to a close. And I'd love to just get your thoughts on, you've obviously working with lots of different organizations talking about this topic. Perhaps what's a myth buster that you could share with us with regards to emotional intelligence that you run up against frequently?
I would say probably one of the biggest myth busters is the excuse mindset. And that is that we, especially in this day and age, we are in a very busy world, as people like to call it. And the word busy and lack of time is probably two of the worst excuses we're using right now. They totally lack ownership, and it lacks priority. So biggest myth buster I can say to you is stop saying you don't have time to do something. Stop saying you're too busy to do something, and start owning the fact that you're choosing not to do it and it's not a priority.
Yeah. I love the phrase. I think it was a guy called Hiram Smith was the one that used it with the first time I came across it, which was, if I say I don't have time, I'm saying I value something else more.
It's absolutely right. We all have 24 hours in a day.
Face that. Yeah.
You've got to
own
it.
Face
That's
it.
exactly right. Look at that, Simon. You're on board.
Okay. Amy, thanks so much for what you've shared today, and I wish you the very best with your book as well. So this is the Emotional Intelligence Advantage: Mastering Change in Difficult Conversations. How do people get in touch with you if they want to follow up on this conversation?
Yeah, so best place to go is to my website, which is amyjacobson.com.au. That will give you all of the links to where you can find me on social media. My book, it'll take you to links through there, but you can get my book in any bookstore. So online, bricks and mortar, wherever it is, you'll find my book. But yeah, contact details are there, and reach out. Like, as you can tell, I love a chat. So always reach out. I'm happy to have a chat.
Great. And what's a takeaway for you from this conversation today?
Takeaway from me, actually, you got me really thinking, Simon, a lot about the balance between the leadership lessons that I actually read out, and I love that. I love that when somebody comes at the same lessons from a slightly different angle and finds that balance. So you got me thinking even deeper about them and where they were coming from, and it's probably been a long time too since I've sat down and actually looked at those lessons. So it's sometimes it's good to hear our own advice, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah. And I'm grateful for you sharing so openly what you have done today. That's been really helpful. I wish you a really special time with your family and continuing to grow and learn from each other. Sounds like a great laboratory for you guys. And wish you again best of success with the book and the work that you're doing in this space. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon. Great chat. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks so much.